How did the U.S. and Israel launch a preemptive strike against Iran? Well, they used a devastating tactic called time on target. With 2 aircraft carriers and a fleet of destroyers, they calculated the exact math. So, Israeli jets and U.S. cruise missiles hit their marks at the exact same second. Israel's main goal was assassinating Khamenei and the top leadership, while the U.S. pounded military targets and other high-value industries. But why did Iranian air defenses fail to activate? Because the U.S. fights with a different kind of technology, using electronic warfare from space, sea, and air. They completely blinded the Iranian radar, just as destroyers launch a swarm of cruise missiles to wipe out the anti-air systems. But wait, the war is still not over. Iran still has thousands of ballistic missiles and drones, so they hit American and Middle Eastern allied bases. And right now, almost everyone is an open target. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a major coordinated military offensive against Iran. Israeli officials called their offensive Operation Roar the Lion, while the U.S. operation was referred to as Operation Epic Fury. The message behind the Israel and U.S. strike was crystal clear. This wasn't just a show of force. This was a targeted move to assassinate the supreme leader of Iran himself. As stated, this wasn't just a random military strike. The ultimate target was the supreme leader's own compound. Missiles were dialed in on highly sensitive areas, specifically around University Street, the Jamhuri district, and near Pasteur Street. If you know the layout of Tehran, you know exactly what this means. This zone isn't just another neighborhood. It is the absolute nerve center of the Iranian government. It houses the primary day-to-day offices of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But here's the catch. The IDF claims they got him. However, the Iranian military stated that Khamenei was not inside his offices when the missiles made impact. The strike may have leveled the compound, but the target slipped away. And right now, the entire region is holding its breath, waiting to see what happens next. But reports indicate that Israel has confirmed Khamenei's body has been found, and he is confirmed dead. Listen, that first wave did not hold back. Not even a little. We're talking about a perfectly synchronized, overwhelming assault. The entire goal was to blind and break the regime all at once. First, they hit Karaj, completely ripping through their critical industrial and aerospace hubs. Then Tehran, the capital, was rocked. Any illusion of safety was completely shattered. They didn't stop there. They struck Qom, sending absolute shockwaves right through the ideological heart of the country. And if you follow this stuff, you know exactly how heavily fortified that area is. Over in the west, missiles literally rained down on Kermanshah, neutralizing those launch sites before the operators could even think about powering up their radars. And then there's Isfahan, the absolute crown jewel of their nuclear and drone programs. Heavily defended. Didn't matter. It just lit up the night sky. But how did the U.S. and Israel actually pull off a preemptive strike on Iran? First of all, look at this map. To make this happen, they didn't just rely on local land bases. They brought 2 massive floating cities right to Iran's doorstep. Down in the Arabian Sea, you've got the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group bearing down from the south and east. And over in the eastern Mediterranean, the biggest and newest ship, the USS Gerald R. Ford. While Israeli jets flew all the way across the Middle East to reach Iranian airspace, timing was absolutely critical. The moment those IDF jets reached their marks, the missiles were released. And that brings us to the most terrifying and complicated part of this entire operation, the synchronization. Military planners rely on a tactic called time on target. Look at this map. You have missiles firing from submarines, cruise missiles launching from escort ships, and massive payload drops from stealth bombers. They are all deploying from completely different locations at entirely different times. But here is the genius of it. The U.S. military machine was mathematically choreographed. So everything impacted Karaj, Qom, Kermanshah, and Isfahan at the exact same second the Israeli jets dropped their guided bombs. It was designed to be a total systemic shock, exploding at the same time. A calculated move to collapse the regime instantly. When those munitions finally hit, it was pure shock and awe. But why did the Iranian air defenses fail to activate? Well, to put it simply, the U.S. military operates in a completely different league. using a highly advanced mix of electronic warfare and cyber operations, coordinated from space to ground. The coalition injected false data directly into Iranian radar screens. Top-tier Iranian air defense systems, like their homegrown Bavar and Russian-supplied batteries, were absolutely overwhelmed by this electronic assault. But to actually hunt them down, the U.S. set a brilliant trap. They launched hundreds of ADM, 160 ALD, miniature air-launch decoys. To a panicked Iranian radar operator staring at a chaotic screen, these tiny drones looked exactly like a massive squadron of F-15s or F-16s screaming toward the capital. With the door kicked wide open, fifth-generation stealth fighters, including both U.S. and Israeli F-35s, with possible F-22 Raptors, sliced through the airspace completely undetected. Ultimately, the Iranian air defense network wasn't just suppressed, it was completely dismantled, at least for that critical time window. Because Iran does have enormous firepower, Tehran fired back with Operation Truthful Promise 4, a massive wave of missiles and drones targeting U.S. bases and allied positions across the Middle East. Here's the fallout. The UAE's Al Dhafra Air Base was hit, leaving one dead from shrapnel. In Bahrain, the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters was directly targeted. Qatar's air defenses successfully wiped out incoming missiles, while Kuwait locked down its entire airspace under heavy fire. Meanwhile, nationwide sirens blasted across Israel, with massive mid-air interceptions lighting up the skies over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. But how did Israel manage to fly all the way to Iran? At 9 o'clock in the morning, Israel launched more than a dozen aircraft, but it's a complicated process. They had to navigate or entirely bypass the airspace of neighboring countries like Syria and Iraq. To avoid hostile air defenses, defense analysts estimate the actual flight distance to reach central Iran is between 930 and 1,240 miles each way. Although these routes may seem straightforward, they involve complex planning, including calculations for aerial refueling and coordinating attack aircraft passing through Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. Israel and the U.S. strategy was to attack Iran in 3 waves. The first wave targeted surface-to-air missile sites, radar installations, and Iran's air defense headquarters in Tehran, Ilam, and Khuzestan. The second wave focused on destroying ballistic missile infrastructure. And finally, the third wave targeted military manufacturing industries. Kicking down the door, the attack began not with manned aircraft, but with robotic precision from the sea. The goal was simple: blind the enemy's eyes, the radars, and silence their voice, the command and control. In the Persian Gulf and the northern Arabian Sea, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers like the USS Thomas Hudner received a launch order. The vertical launch system cells flew open, and moments later, dozens of Tomahawk land attack missiles erupted from the decks. These missiles flew at subsonic speeds, hugging the terrain in what we call nap-of-the-earth flight, staying below the radar horizon. They were programmed to loiter and strike simultaneously. Their warheads slammed into S-300 and S-400 radar sites and command bunkers, degrading the integrated air defense system and carving out safe corridors for the pilots minutes behind them. 30 minutes past H hour. While the Tomahawks were still impacting, the silver bullets of the U.S. Air Force were already deep inside hostile airspace. These are the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. With the air defense network fractured by Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from destroyers hundreds of miles away, the path was now clear. Strategic sites like nuclear bunkers were now exposed, ready to be bombed by the B-2 Spirit, the tip of the spear. Launching from bases in Jordan and the UAE, squadrons of F-15E Strike Eagles roared into the theater. These are the bomb trucks of the operation. Each F-15 was heavily laden with GBUs and small-diameter bombs, capable of carrying up to 19 GBUs or 28 small-diameter weapons. While the B-2s hit the deep bunkers, the F-15s hunted the mobile targets. Their AESA radar scanned the ground for ballistic missile launchers hiding in valleys. Working in pairs, they dropped precision bombs on missile convoys, hangars, and secondary command nodes. Once Winchester out of ammo or low on fuel, they didn't go home yet. They retreated to tanker tracks established in Phase 1, taking on thousands of pounds of jet fuel in midair before turning back for a second sortie. 2 hours past H hour. To sustain the pressure, the U.S. Navy's floating air bases entered the fight. Cruising in the Arabian Sea, A carrier strike group turned into the wind. Steam and electromagnetic catapults began launching aircraft every 30 seconds. Fa-18 Super Hornets launched carrying anti-radiation missiles. Their job was dead: destruction of enemy air defenses. They hunted down any surviving radar operators foolish enough to turn their systems back on. Meanwhile, F-35C Lightnings pushed forward to gather intelligence and strike high-threat targets that older jets simply could not reach. Orbiting far behind them were the E-2D Hawkeyes, the quarterbacks in the sky, managing the massive traffic of hundreds of U.S. jets. By sunrise, the first wave was over. The eyes of the enemy air defense had been blinded by Tomahawks. The heart of the nuclear program had been crushed by the B-2, and the limbs of missile forces had been severed by F-15s and carrier aircraft.